Stefan, are you having any?
Yes. All right.
Yeah.
Good morning, good afternoon, good everyone, depending from where you are joining from this talk series for this month of October. I know we just have this talk for 2 weeks ago, so we have a very short window for this time. Uh, we we hope this will be a very interesting talks. Seeing the many joining now, almost more than 60 right now from all over the world. In fact, a couple of people asking me last night. One is from Trinidad and Tobago, so as far as Trinidad, and then someone from the Australian. So thank you so much for joining in. We have talked about the past two edition. The last August and September, we talked about the issue of life, especially on the IVF and also the billing methods, which is very important issue for all of us, family who have children or who are expecting children, which continue to be a very controversial issue. But we hope that we have, with those two talks that we have, we at least now have a better understanding about the implication, especially on the moral aspect of the IVF and also on the importance of this billing method as the natural family planning methods. So today we go back against to the issue of marriage as the themes that we have, life, love, and marriage. We are happy to have the two couples here joining us, Mr. John and Mr. Joann Lim. Sorry, Mr. John and Joann Ooi. So thank you for joining us and your kindness. I know you have been very busy with all your activity there in Singapore. So so we are lucky to have both of them here. As I mentioned in the WhatsApp group, John and Joann Ooi has married for almost for more than 4 decades. So I guess you're expecting for the golden anniversary. We pray for you for reaching this important milestone. And they have 6 adult children. So I hope maybe one of them are still Gen Z or General Millennial. So it's quite challenging to raise a Gen Z or Gen Millennial right now. And I think they also have a lot of talks on marriage, even many workshops to have individual and couples navigate the relationship. And this is a very important issue also, as we know that in my own country where I'm coming from right now in Indonesia and Jakarta, the divorce rate is increasing, not only amongst the Muslim countries, Muslim people, because we are a highly Muslim population, but also among the Christian and Catholics. As we know, we are Catholic, we don't recognize divorce, but yet there are still a lot of challenges, and divorce rates are going high. So relationship for couples is quite more and more challenging right now, given the pressure of the wars that we are facing right now. Interestingly, Joann Ooi is also a professional lawyer and a trained life coach. So I'm not so sure what ICF is. So maybe you can explain later on what ICF stands for. And also the NLP practitioner and a positive intelligence. This is very interesting in the area of artificial intelligence, machine learning. So now we are still talking about human intelligence, so positive intelligence. So we hope to hear something about this later on. And then also they are a mental fitness coach. Mental health is a big issue right now in the big cities, not only in big cities, but also in other small cities all over the world. On the other hand, John is an educational consultant and curriculum development and is a certified master on relationship coach. This is the first time I heard about master relationship coach. So this is very interesting. I think it shows that this issue on relationship is not something that has to be taken lightly. It can be also approached in a scientific way. So I think we're happy to see to have both of them here. And as what we have previously, we will have probably around 45 to an hour talk by both John and Joann. And then we can spend maybe 15 or 20 minutes for Q&A at the end. Okay, so everyone, thank you so much. You can mute, and you can also inactive your video just to save the bandwidth for this presentation. This presentation will be recorded, and I hope we can share the recording for those of us here who cannot join. Thank you, John and Joann. Please.
Okay, right. Thank you, Stefan, for giving us this opportunity to share our experiences with the audience. Right. I'm John.
I'm Joann.
We've been married 40 years, and in those 40 years, we have had a fair share of fights. Hence, this topic that we feel quite we have experience to share about. All right. Now, we're going to try and make it a little interactive to some extent if we can. So for starters, can I just request the audience, the participants, our friends here, we'd just like to know, are you here as one half of a couple, or is your other half also present, right? So if your other half is also attending, could you key in a 2 in the chat? And if you are on here on your own, you can't spot your spouse's name in the participant list and so on, just key in a 1 so that we have a sense of, are we talking to one half or are we talking to the couple? Yeah, okay. So most are 1s, but we see a couple of 2s. Okay, thank you very much.
A lot of my friends who know John always tell me that your husband is such a cool, calm, collected guy. I don't believe you, if you tell me that he fights with you. Well, I told my friends, well, he really can fight when he wants to. You see, both of us have got very, very strong personalities. We tend to get into heated arguments quite often. So in our 40 years of marriage, we have had numerous fights over small issues and big ones. But about 10 years ago, something happened in our marriage. We fought almost every day over the smallest of things, and to the point where we wondered if our marriage would survive. I remembered coming home from work every day, feeling very miserable. And I even wondered why I married this man here.
Okay, so we have a question for you. Is fighting bad for a married couple's relationship? Right? Could we invite you to key in either yes or no, or maybe if you're not sure, and we'll just see what, all right, do you think fighting is bad for a married couple's relationship? Okay, so a fair sprinkling of no, yes, some say it's normal, maybe, and so on, right? Okay, what does research tell us as the answer to this question? Now, on and off through our presentation or sharing with you this evening, we will refer to a few of the writers that we've read about and so on. And the one who gave an explicit answer to this question are the Gottmans, right? Some of you may have heard of them before. They have studied marriage relationship. And actually, if you listen to them, they say that if they watch the interaction between husband and wife for 3 minutes, they can predict how the relationship will turn out 6 years hence, right? So they have studied this thing. And what did the Gottman say? It's not whether we fight that determines relationship success. It's how we fight. All right. So it's something for us to think about. The key thing is not whether or not we fight. I think some of you have already said that it's almost inevitable. We have two persons, two minds, two wills, right? There will be disagreement. But the key thing is how we fight, right? So for our sharing today, there are 4 questions that we'll try to deal with a little bit more comprehensively. The first one is, how do we fight? How do you fight with your spouse? To be comprehensive, we thought we should explore also, actually, what are you fighting about? Because in our own experience, quite often, halfway through a fight, we wonder, what is the issue? Right? Because other things get dragged in. Third question is, how do you recover after a fight? And suppose, how do you minimize fights, right? So you can appreciate each other better. Okay, let's start off with how do you fight? This cartoon came to us, which we thought quite useful. There was this husband who wanted as his wife, who never seemed to fight back. So one day he asked her the question, how do you control your anger?
I clean the toilet.
Now, that sounds like a very funny answer, isn't it? How does cleaning the toilet help you to control your anger? The husband asked.
I use your toothbrush.
Okay, so
John, don't worry. I won't do that to you, although I clean toilets in our house.
okay, I certainly hope not. But all right, I think this is just a lighthearted look to answer the question, how do we fight? Okay, or how do you fight? Now, if you look at how people fight, there are certain common styles, certain patterns of fighting, right? So you have the conflict avoiders. These are persons who just agree to disagree so that there's no need to fight, right? So they would rather wash dishes than argue a point out.
You see, in our 40 years of marriage, John has become an expert at washing dishes. As he washes dishes, he would be contemplating the points of argument that I raised. He'd rather not get into an argument or a fight with me. So John is a conflict avoider sometimes.
Then there are conflict validators. Basically, these are persons who bring up an issue and then they express their feelings calmly, and then they jump immediately into problem solving, right? And then there are the conflict volatiles who bring up the issue, express their feeling very intensely, and then try to prove that they are right and their spouses is wrong. Okay, so there are different styles.
So John very often is a conflict validator. His brain is skewed towards problem solving. You see, he has been a lecturer for 26 years of his life, and he is always in a problem solving mode. Whereas I am a conflict volatile. When I am very passionate about something and want to get my way, I would express my feelings very intensely, and I would try to prove that I'm right and that John is wrong.
I have learned to my sometimes sorrow that it doesn't help to jump straight into problem solving, because even if you arrive at a solution to the apparent problem, my wife needs to air it out and express the emotions. And if it doesn't get done, the problem isn't really solved. Okay, now, different people have different fighting styles. But what the Gottmans have learned, and this is important for all of us to take note, right? They said what is important is how you fight. So they said, whatever your fighting style, you can have a successful relationship as long as the ratio of positive to negative responses is at least 5 to 1. Now, why 5 to 1? All right, they have found that from their research. So we don't, when we fight, I think we're not going to count, did I do 5:1 or not? As we'll share later, we just need to make a conscious effort to make more positive responses than negative responses. But let's understand these two first. What are negative responses?
So we all know what criticism is. It means blaming a problem on a personality flaw of your spouse. I would say this to John. Your fingers are too slow. We missed the Black Friday sale. Now we have to pay 30% more for the item. It's all your fault.
Actually, my delay was because I didn't want to spend the money. But okay, I've learned to live with criticism. Okay. Then the second negative response is contempt, which is somewhat like criticism, right? But it has a dash of superiority. I'm better than you. Okay? The third negative response is defensiveness.
There are times when I feel very angry with John because of the words that he used. He would say to me, "You're really bad at keeping track of money. You don't even know how much money you have in your bank account. Learn to use the Excel spreadsheet. It's so easy to use." Well, John is a very, very good at Excel spreadsheets. Everything that I can think of is on his Excel spreadsheet, from his accounts to the renovation, tracking of the expenses in the family. Sometimes it really gets to me.
Okay, let's move on. Defensiveness, all right? Defensiveness just feels that, okay, I'm under attack and therefore I'd rather not deal with it, all right? Or sometimes it just means that, well, we counter-attack and say, okay, I admit I'm like this, but what about you? You're also like that.
Coming back to the Black Friday sale, so we had this fight. It's not my fault, no, that we missed the Black Friday sale. You told me about this item that you wanted to buy at the 11th hour. How do you expect me to move my fingers so quickly?
Okay, stonewalling.
Stonewalling is what I do a lot. It's when a spouse shuts down completely and refuses to engage in the discussion by saying, "I don't want to talk about this anymore," or simply walking away. In our 40 years of marriage, I did a lot of stonewalling. I would usually just withdraw into my shell and not talk about it. Whereas John is the kind of person who wants to settle the issues immediately during the fight, even though I'm not in the mood, even though I'm really very angry and I'm full of anger. So I resorted to stonewalling.
Okay, so these are negative responses. But okay, we all have some of these characteristics. What is more important is to understand the positive responses and how we can make them, all right? So we'll have a few slides on this. One positive response is just to acknowledge the feelings and emotion of the spouse, right? So just to say, well, I hear you, I understand where you're coming from, it's okay to feel that way, and so on.
Listening with empathy. I think it's very important for our spouses to listen to us with empathy. What does that mean? Listening with empathy means being present, being actively listening and putting yourself into the shoes of the other person. John has got this habit of putting on his earpods, you know, and listening to YouTube channels on US-China relationships and the development of the US-China relations. I would tell him that, you know, when you do this, you make me feel very unimportant. Am I not important to you? I would ask him. And I now deem John to be an expert on US-China relations. So if any of you want to have a discussion with him, please feel free to contact him.
All right. The third type of positive response is just affirmative or calming words, right? I agree with you. I like what you said about this, and so on, right?
Actually, there are many times when I wish John would say things would use these affirmative or calming words when we are in the heat of an argument. He likes to say, let's take a break and talk about this later. Well, a pause actually prevents escalation of the fight. But I would like him to say this to me. I appreciate you sharing your perspective because that validates my point of view. Or I wish he would say, I care about how you feel because that reinforces emotional support. Or, you know, when we're doing a home improvement project, which we are doing now, and we are fighting about it, some of the things, I wish he would say to me, we are a team, and I want to work through this together because that emphasizes unity. And of course, I would like him to say, I love you, and I want to understand you better. Or, thank you for your honesty, because that shows that he appreciates open communication.
Right. Then the fourth type of positive could be a show of affection, just simply holding hands even when you're having the disagreement, or to touch or putting hand on knee if you're sitting next to, and so on. All right. Okay, these are just examples of what is a positive response. Okay, so on this question of how do you fight, there are 3 tips we'd like to share with you to raise your awareness of this. The first one is this: to use I statements more consciously. All right. Usually when we are upset with our spouse, we bring up issue, we bring it to their attention, and usually our words start with you. You did this, you didn't do that, and so on and so on. And already when you use the word, start with the word you, it becomes a very accusatory scenario, right? You're accusing the other party of whatever, right? And of course, the other party will then respond accordingly. So we would like to suggest this idea of I statements. Now, quite often we may say, I feel angry. Why don't you? You know, that is not a lead up to a proper use of the I. It is just expressing emotion and then jumping to the accusatory scenario. So we like to suggest that you kind of think there is a structure to the I statement, right? Where you express your feeling, then you describe your need or the situation, and then you make your request to your spouse.
You see, John, being a civil engineer lecturer, is very good at structures, creating structures. Now, so when we were preparing for this talk, my question is to him is that, do you think that when you are in a fight and you're all heated emotionally, would you remember to come up with a structure where you express your feeling, your need, and your request? Well, I hope you all get to practice that because we are also practicing that.
Okay, yes. So when you are in it and starting to get hot, we have another tip for you, all right? But in a sense, it's almost like you have to prepare yourself to bring up the issue, right? So if you just jump in straight away, yeah, the chances are it will get our hand. But if you kind of step back a bit, kind of imagine or prepare, right? So I mean, I think you probably realize from your past fights that when you jump straight in with the accusatory thing, yeah, it tends to lead to an argument. So we just like to suggest to you that if you prepare for it, you prepare how to bring it up, there's a better chance of the outcome being the way you want it. And I just like to share with you one example. All right. So by now you've realized that well, I watch our family's expenses, and maybe you have sensed that Joann is less disciplined in that area. All right. So it might be something like this, right? Rather than say, why did you spend so much money on this item? You never even discussed with me beforehand, right? And that is almost surely going to lead to, why can't I spend the money? I earned it, and so on, right? So I statement, my feeling, I feel anxious when unexpected costs come up, right? The situation is we have a fixed household income. We just about spend what we make, right? So my request is, can we discuss before you commit to any significant expense? So it's, all right, that's the structure that you can think about, rather than say, why did you spend this amount of money? Don't you know we have nothing left in the bank? Okay. Right. So you've started your engagement, and quite possibly it's not turning out well, and you can feel yourself getting hotter and hotter inside, right? So what's happening, you know?
This tip is about changing our inner dialogue. Now, we all know, and I'm sure all of you are aware, that all our thoughts originate from our brain. And these thoughts can be positive in nature, or it can be negative in nature. And these thoughts will translate into emotions, and these emotions will result in certain reactions or responses. When I decided to go into retirement, now I'm in semi-retirement, the best thing that I have done for myself is to enroll in a program called Positive Intelligence. Now, the founder says that we all have this Jedi or a Darth Vader in all of us. Okay, I'm using the characters from the Star Wars because I think everybody can relate to the characters in Star Wars movie unless you have never watched the shows, the movie. And I learned that when we have negative emotions, it is like putting our hand on a hot stove. You know that when you put your hand on the hot stove, what is your reflex? You will take your hand away. And having negative emotions should be like this. It should just be an alert to us that, oh dear, what am I feeling here? Why am I so angry? What am I going to do about this emotion? If we continue to put our hand on the hot stove, we are going to get burned, right? So negative emotions, when it comes on, should just be an alert to us. To do what? An alert to us to shift from a state of negative emotion to a state of positive emotion. And that is the strategy that I learned when I enrolled in the program Positive Intelligence.
So what Joann is saying is that things start with your thoughts, the way you think, right? And of course, if you, so what we are really saying is you need to, you could say, reframe your thoughts, right? See it differently so that it can steer you in a direction that will be helpful.
So what I learned from this positive intelligence program is that you can actually, by practicing certain techniques, you can actually shift from negative emotion to positive emotions. And if you do it often enough, it will increase the mental fitness. So I have been practicing mindfulness techniques, which has been devised by Professor Shazad Shamani, the founder of Positive Intelligence. And I discovered that by doing those mindfulness exercises, it actually helps me to recover quickly when I have a fight with John. Instead of stonewalling him for a few days, now I recover faster and perhaps just stonewall for a few hours. And then I will talk to him and tell him that, okay, let's discuss this. So this program has really indeed increased my mental fitness.
Okay, how have I applied this tip 2 on change your inner dialogue? You know, when we were preparing for this talk, sometimes Joann will come up with last minute changes, and that upsets me quite a bit because it upsets the flow of thought that I have about, you know, what we want to say, right? So potentially it could upset me and it could lead to an argument between two to say or not to say this, to share this or not to share this and stuff like that, right? But I tell myself that, you know, Joann is just anxious to do a good job, to share with you all our experiences, and she's just tense and uptight about how things will go, right? So when I talk to myself in this manner, instead of feeling upset with her, it's easier for me to see that we are on the same side because we both want it to turn out well, right? And in that sense, it changes, or you could say it changes my emotional state, right? And I'm more receptive to what she may want to say. Okay. All right. So that's tip number 2. Now, tip number 3 is to consciously make positive responses, right? Because as you saw previously from the research by Gottmans, how you fight, well, if you're aware of, if you do make good positive responses instead of the negative ones, it helps your relationship to grow. So we can make better use of that research finding by applying it and consciously making positive responses during our disagreements, right? And okay, we've shared with you these 4 points, examples of these. Okay, now we have another question for you, right? So okay, so how do couples fight? They, you know, they are in the midst of it. They are doing things, saying things to each other. What is their biggest mistake in a fight? What is the biggest mistake that couples can make in a fight? They fight to what? Can you all key in what you think is the answer? Okay, they fight to win. They call each other names. They fight to win. Yes, that's right. The mistake they make is that they fight to win. Now, why is this a mistake? If you fight to win, if I fight to win, that means my wife must lose. So it's already a win-lose situation. And of course, I mean, none of us wants to lose, right? So we fight back. Okay. So when we fight to win, it is setting up more trouble for ourselves. So what is the smartest thing that couples can do when they fight? They fight to what? Can you key in what you think is the answer? The smartest thing that couples can do in a fight. Okay, to clarify, to understand. Okay, very good. Wow, we've got a good group here who understands. All right, so let's see. Yeah. Yes, they fight to understand. Okay, understand what? Okay, they fight to understand their spouse and why the spouse is saying things, has that particular position that is different from theirs. Okay. Okay, so you fight to calm down. Okay, you fight to get common ground. You fight to understand each other. All right, different ideas there, but related. So we'd like to share with this thing, fight to understand, and to understand this term. They fight to understand better. I'd like to share with share some ideas and thoughts with you. Understand. Well, okay, you could say understand quite a few things. You got to understand what you're fighting about, right? You've got to understand your spouse. Why is your spouse having this position that's different from yours? Now, I think we all know that, when we have fight with our spouse, quite often past unresolved issues are brought up, isn't it? Right? We get very angry with each other and we'll say all kinds of things. We call names, we insult each other's, our in-laws, and every bad habit that comes up, all things are brought up. Okay? So in the end, you've got so many entangled issues that, yeah, they're so integrated, so entangled, it's really impossible to resolve in a single instance. Right?
There was one time in our life when I was very busy traveling abroad for work purposes. I made many trips around the region for work. So one day, John drove me to a park. It's called the MacRitchie Reservoir. It's a reservoir here in Singapore, and most people go to the reservoir to exercise or to go on dates. But we went there to have a fight. And after a heated argument and a hurling of a lot of hurtful words, John expressed his thoughts. Of course, he didn't say that, oh, you have neglected me. I think most men would not say this to their wives. He said, you are neglecting the children when you're away for such long periods of time. And of course, I made an inference. Yes, I neglected the children, but I also neglected him. So very often in a fight, a lot of issues are actually on the surface. But if we delve deep enough and go beneath the surface, we discover that actually the issues are deeper than what was brought up initially. If you can think about the image of an iceberg, you know, the part of the iceberg that floats on top is just a small part of the big iceberg. There's really a huge volume of ice below the water level. And fighting about issues is just like an iceberg. Do we just look at the issues,
At the apparent issue.
at the apparent issues, or do we try to listen more intently, more actively, and try to figure out what is really below what has been said?
Okay, so tip 4 for you on to help clarify what are you fighting about is just to be curious. All right, be curious and try and dig deeper. And to help you dig deeper, we'd like to share with you something that I have found useful in the past, which is Stephen Covey's 7 Habits of Highly Effective People, right? So those of you who have heard of him or know him, the first 3 habits deal with personal effectiveness. The 4th to the 6th habit deal with interpersonal effectiveness, right? And the 6th is just the 7th is sharpening the saw. But the relevant ones for tonight's talk are the habit 4, 5, 6, which is think win-win, seek first to understand, then to be understood, and then to synergize. Now, what sparked off the incident that Joann shared previously when we went to the park and talked was that she was about to make a business trip, right? And on the face of it, I was objecting to her business trip. And if she had just said, why is he stopping me? That is why I'm John stopping Joann from going a business trip. After all, the family benefits when she gets more business and things like that, right? If you had stopped as though, oh, he doesn't want me to go on business, that was not actually the issue, right? I was concerned for our family, for her time with them, and also, without wanting to admit it too much, her time with me, right? So these 4 habits, habit 4, 5, and 6, are the habits that could help us to dig deeper, to be curious. Habit 5 is to seek first to understand. So you need to be curious and ask, in this apparent issue, does your spouse have any unspoken underlying concern? Right? You need to see if you can dig that out. Okay. Then once you've understood better your spouse's underlying concern, you also need to understand your own concern, right? And to communicate and make yourself understood. So when both the concerns of both parties, your spouse and yourself, are clearer, it is easier to look for a win-win solution that meets both persons' concerns, right? Okay, so that's the theory of it all we can share with you. Of course, in reality, it's a bit more complicated, but you know, be curious, dig deeper, try to understand your spouse's underlying concern to an objection that he may raise, which may be upsetting you.
We've been married for 40 years. I came to realize that I cannot change John.
Yeah.
So, what do I do then? Whenever we fight or something bad happens? Well, I have to accept him as a person with all his gifts, talents, habits. And once I accept him as a person, I find that I will have more peace. And when we fight, there'll be some circumstances which shows his point of view, which he brings across, is so strong. Then what do? Well, I can turn that into a gift of peace for the family, peace and harmony for the family, but also a gift for myself. How? You see, I'm a very impatient person. When I want to get things done, it has to be done very quickly. And John is a process thinker. He needs to think things through and do things one step at a time. And to me, the one step at a time sometimes just take too long. So how do I turn that into a gift for myself? Well, I tell myself that he is helping me to grow in patience. And this I have learned through positive intelligence, mind you, just last year when I started, just this year when I started the program. And for some of my friends, they have shown me that they can turn a gift into a gift for others if the circumstances can benefit actually those who are less fortunate. I won't go into that, yeah.
Okay, so our point here is this, that in the previous tip 4, be curious, there's a methodology, you could say, right, for trying to resolve points of disagreement, issues. Okay, and so you try to do that. But actually, I think in our own experience, and certainly from the government's research, the majority of problems don't really get solved, right? There's no solution in that sense. Okay, so so this conflict then, right, is something that needs to be managed rather than solved, because there's really no final lasting solution, right? So how do you manage it? Well, this tip is to get ourselves to see it differently as a gift of peace and harmony. So if I am having a disagreement with Joann, right? And if, for example, on pondering it, it is not unreasonable to give in, all right? Because, yeah, we see things differently. I could insist on my thing, but she's also insisting on her thing. Then for the harmony of a family, well, you live and let live, right? And it's also a gift of peace to myself, because then I just accept it more readily and say, well, we couldn't resolve this. It's just one of those things that have no, two differing views. And that gift of peace is more important than actually finding that elusive solution, right? That's a bit too far away because of our different ways of seeing things. Right. So on this second question, we started with, what are you fighting about? We had 2 tips: be curious and turn this into a gift of peace and harmony. The third question we said we would discuss with you or share with you is, how do you recover after a fight? Now, if you look at your own behavior, and I mean, I look at my behavior and my wife's behavior, quite often after we fight, we have a disagreement, we split apart and we sulk, right? We ignore each other. I will go to my desk or the room and so on, and I do my own thing. I ignore her. And Joann will go up to her kitchen, which is her castle, and she will do her thing.
Bang a few pots.
All right. And maybe bang a few pots, especially hard so that I can hear her unhappiness. Okay. So from what we've observed, many times this period of sulking continues for a certain period of time. From what we've seen, it can be overnight, it can be a few days. We are also aware that for some of our friends, it can be a few weeks, right? So how do you recover after a fight? We'd just like to share with you one basic rule, a basic tip, which we call the 10% rule, right? Now, the 10% rule basically says that your spouse is at least 10% right in this situation. I mean, logically, we know that it takes two parties to argue. We have different ways of seeing things and so on. But usually we tell ourselves that the fault lies with our spouse, right? I mean, I see myself as innocent. I see myself as right. It was all her fault. You know, the 10% rule reminds me, like, to think that, hey, there is at least 10% right in what she said or did or in a position, but I need to be aware of it. So am I looking for that 10% where she's right or not? Or I just to have a blanket rule, she's 100% wrong.
I used to think that I'm always 100% right and John is 100% wrong, especially in those matters that I'm very passionate about. So then, when I did the positive intelligence program, I learned about this 10% rule. And to my horror, I realized that, oh no, I'm not 100% right most of the time. And the beautiful thing about this 10% rule is that how do you find out what is this 10% that your spouse is right about? And this 10%, if you can dig further and find out, it actually helps to build, you can use it to rebuild your relationship after a fight.
You know, I think we are all quite used to this yes, but, you know, whenever we have a discussion with our boss at work or with our colleagues on a project or even with our spouse, and they say something that's different from what we think, we will say yes, but, you know, the but automatically follows, and that but allows us to say everything that's wrong with them and so on and so on. Okay? We'd like to suggest that you look at it differently. Yes, and. Yes, you've said all this. Yes, yes, yes. And what? And this is the part that I can agree with you, or this is the part that I can accept, that I find most appealing and things like that, right? So maybe bear in mind this 10% rule and its practical implication. Instead of yes, but, change it to a yes, and. Okay? And the other practical application of this rule is something like this. Usually after a fight, we think we are in the right. The one in the wrong was our spouse, and we are both sulking, and we are waiting for our spouse because the spouse is in the wrong, right? So we are waiting for our spouse to come up and apologize to us. Okay, because we are in the right one. So the one in the wrong should be the one to say sorry. Okay. But if you think of this 10%, right? My spouse is at least 10% right, which means that I am 10% wrong, isn't it? I'm 10% in the wrong. Maybe that 10% in the wrong is because I lost my temper. My voice got louder and louder, whatever. So for that 10% contribution, at least, it's something for me to apologize for. Right? So it's not only saying my spouse must apologize first. This 10% rule reminds me that I have that 10% that I can apologize for and initiate the reconciliation process. Say something. Okay, so just I was just curious when we were preparing for this. You know, nowadays we have all this AI, and I was just curious. Okay, learning to say sorry. Does Chat GPT and all these AI programs anything to suggest? So I just keyed in this one, just curious what might be, and okay, this is what this particular AI was Copilot. This is what he said. So, all right, I leave it to you to see, is it reasonable or is it totally unreasonable, right? But okay. Now, our fourth question is, how do you minimize fights? All right, I mean, as we saw earlier, having fights in itself doesn't ruin the relationship. It's how we fight. But of course, it introduces unpleasantness. So we try to minimize these points of contention, right? And one of what we like to share with you is this idea of working on or staying emotionally connected, right? Because when we are emotionally connected, it's easier to take disagreements or difficult or nasty words from the other party because we are emotionally connected. Okay. Now, this is actually quite a very wide area, a big area. Okay, and we don't have time today to do it, but we'll just introduce this idea to you because what we have seen from our friends, all right, we've been married 40 years, our friends are in the 60s, many of them, all right, 60s, 70s, and we see that unfortunately, over the years, they have grown more distant from each other. They have kind of like the emotional connection has frayed and got weaker and weaker. And we have friends right now where they are basically living separate lives. All right. Even if they have not divorced, is you live your life your way, you do your thing, I do mine. You don't interrupt me, you don't interfere with me. It's almost like two separate lives, which we think is a very sad situation, right? So just to flag out to you that staying emotionally connected helps you as you to grow old together, but it also helps you minimize your fights. Now, it's a big area. Just like to share with you that one aspect of being emotionally connected, or one aspect that can help you to be emotionally connected is to be grateful. All right, to be grateful for your spouse, to be grateful to your spouse, right? And what you see on the right was something that I gave Joann many years ago, and I actually forgotten about it until we were preparing for the talk, and she remembered. So I suspect she remembered it for. Well, I forgot lah. I'll put it that way, but she remembered. Okay.
This was a very nice gesture that John did for my birthday many years ago. And John is the kind who doesn't believe in giving birthday presents. So when I saw this, I was really very surprised and very, pleasantly surprised. So I thought that we should share this with you so that the men out here can perhaps, do something similar to express gratitude to your wives. But of course, wives too can also express gratitude for your husbands by doing something similar or something else.
Okay, so in this past hour, what have we covered with you? A quick recap, right? We gave you 3 questions. Is fighting bad for a married couple? The answer we've suggested to you from research is, yeah, it's not whether we fight that determines relationship success, it's how we fight. What is the biggest mistake of a couple? They fight to win. What's the smartest thing to do? They fight to understand, right? And we've shared with you 7 tips pertaining to these 4 aspects of fighting. The first 3, how do you fight? Use I statements. Change your inner dialogue. Consciously make positive responses. What are you fighting about? To be clear, be curious. And if those instances where you can't, there's no apparent solution, consider how you may turn this into a gift for yourself, for your spouse, for your family. How do you recover after a fight? Remember this 10% rule. Your spouse is at least 10% correct, right? And how do you minimize fights? Stay emotionally connected. Okay. Right. So that is essentially what we'd like to share with you today. But rather than just leave it as that, I'd like you to just take a couple of minutes just to digest what we have shared with you and to kind of put down what did you find useful that perhaps you might share with your spouse and ask the spouse to help you put into practice, right? And if you could also share that with the rest of us in the chat, then we'll see, it's partly feedback for us, but it's also sharing, encouraging each other on, because, well, I guess we learn from each other. Okay. So 2 responses is the 10% rule. Okay. 10% rule and also positive to negative.
10% rule.
Yeah. Okay, so seems like the 10% rule was the game changer. Great. Message. Yes and response. Okay. Structuring of our concerns and so on. Emotion. Okay, all right. So it looks like different things have benefited different people. That's very good. Don't, when you log off, don't just forget about it. Maybe you can write that down. You can, I think most of you are here on your own rather than as a, with your spouses. So I think if you could make the effort to share that with your spouse, what you've learned, and maybe help each other to put it into practice by saying, okay, I like this rule. I think it's most meaningful. But yeah, when I'm in the middle of a quarrel with you, of course, it doesn't come automatically. Think about it, right? So at that time, I give you permission to remind me to practice this rule. Okay.
Questions?
Okay.
No,
still have. Okay. All right. Just a couple of things we'll share with you, and then if I'll leave it to Stephen whether he wants to continue or put it to question and answer. We are, for those of you who are in Singapore, I think many of you are from other places, but for those in Singapore, Joann and I are organizing an intimacy reimagined dinner, right? To try to help couples deepen that emotional connection, right? So if you are in Singapore on this date, maybe you want to consider bringing your spouse along, okay? We are also having a workshop on 30th November, co-creating your dream marriage. It's a kind of like couples sit back and look at their marriage and say, okay, what are the issues? What are the things we can do better? And just to kind of identify areas that can enhance their marriage. Okay, so if you're in Singapore on these 2 dates, you could contact us. like to thank you for joining us. We're happy to stay on, answer questions. I leave that to Stephen to moderate. But if you want to contact us, these are our contact numbers and our email. All right, Stephen, back to you.
Wow, thank you so much. Wonderful, John and Joann. I think this is a wonderful sharing of experience and also some tips. I think I myself, as you explain all your story, I can really portray my own story. My wife is listening on the other rooms. I can see that she is laughing also all the time. Yeah, and I think this is something that is wonderful, and I think it will benefit a lot of us. I particularly and my wife, and I think I would like to encourage you organize a dinner in Singapore. I hope we have a lot of participants here joining us from Africa. One day probably we have to organize dinner in Africa with all many participants here from Africa. In fact, for those dialing from outside of the region of Asia, I would encourage probably you get in touch with John and Joann, because John and Joann is also organizing a lot of training and workshop. You can invite them, and it will be a very wonderful support for other couples of your friends, probably in Africa or in Europe. Something that really benefiting a lot of couples in the marriage relationship. And I notice here today we have more than 100 participants. That just shows how important it is to improve our marriage relationship. This is one of the better important issue in life, love, and marriage event that we have right now. So I'd like to open, I have a lot of questions actually, but I'd like to open for all of you here. You can turn on your video and unmute yourself and ask John and Joann directly, or you can also type in the chat. Please feel free.
There's one question: how to solve the problem?
We have question there, John. If you see in the chat.
Yeah. Okay. How to solve is a problem is about marital infidelity. Well, that's a tough one,
I
right?
don't think we can answer adequately now.
Yeah, we won't be able to answer it right now. So
it depends on the circumstances of the case.
yeah, actually, we didn't mention earlier. Joann and I are facilitators in a group called Surviving, a Catholic Divorce Support Group, right? So we do have some occasions when we meet people who have suffered this situation. It's quite complicated. I suppose in theory, we can only say that if that person involved in infidelity is willing to stop seeing the third party, then there is a chance that the marriage can be saved, right? But if that person is not prepared to stop seeing the third party, it is very difficult. And then I remember seeing one video also that, it's not easy to forget about the infidelity of the spouse, right? So rather than say forgive and forget, the approach is more to say, look, we want to make our marriage work. It's almost like we have to redesign our marriage version 2.0, right? Yeah, okay, so those are just some quick thoughts, but yeah, it's difficult, right? Okay, some question about, do we get recording of this? I think Stephen will let you know. He's recorded this session, so...
There's a question from Cheese. How do you connect when a spouse masks their real self and emotions?
How do you connect when the spouse masks the real self and emotions? Look here. Well, I think deep down inside, each one of us wants to unload and share more about ourselves, right? But we are so used to a habit pattern where we hide our true selves even from our spouse. I mean, especially men, I think we don't find it easy to talk. right? About ourselves. So I can only say go for dates. When you go for dates, learn again to talk about your emotions and your feelings. Okay. I know when our kids came along, I mean, when Joann and I were courting.
Can you pick
of
this
course.
kid, shoes, everything?
Sorry, what if?
No, somebody is talking.
Oh, what if the spouse is not interested?
Yeah, there's a quick question from Elizabeth. What to do if the spouse is not interested in any communications? Just want to be married, nothing more than that. Sorry, you're mute. John, you're mute. John, you're mute.
Sorry.
We can't hear you.
Okay.
Okay. Right.
We have encountered quite a lot of our friends whose spouses are not interested in communication at all. It is not, it is very difficult for us to give an answer in this session because we have to delve deeper into the reasons why the spouse is not communicative. Sometimes it could be because of certain things that have happened in the spousal relationship that causes the spouse to withdraw into his or her shell. So it's kind of difficult for us unless we know more detail surrounding the circumstances in which has been explained here.
Okay. Depending on which country you're in and so on, maybe the generic answer we can give is try and go for a marriage encounter weekend. I think they are worldwide, right? So there's a high chance that they exist in whichever country you're from. So that helped us in our own marriage difficulties at one point. It kind of took us away from the low point and started us on our journey of recovery. All right. And okay, I think
the other program that we would also recommend, but I'm not sure whether it's in your country, is a Catholic program. It's called Retrovile. Retrovile is a program for married couples who have deep issues and who are actually contemplating divorce.
A round of tuna, yeah? I want you to explain to me why you're throwing snacks. So what did you eat?
Oops.
Sorry. Sorry. Someone forget to mute.
2 sessions.
That's another. You.
all right. I'm not too sure to what extent we can help because you have so diverse
Lying.
situations, right?
And
We've
you
given
lying.
you our email. So maybe I could just say in general, make contact with us. Then I don't know if we can help out. We'll try. But okay. Just make. All right. Okay.
They want the
Retrovile.
spelling. Yeah, somebody asked, please give us the spelling of the second Catholic program, Retrovile. We have it in Singapore. I'm not sure whether
You are my best friend, but now.
country.
Yeah. Okay.
Who else is also saying lies here? Who is lying? I don't want lies, okay?
John, sorry, can you unmute yourself?
Yeah.
Sorry about that.
Okay. All right. Is there any
Other questions?
question that we? Yeah.
Yeah, I think there's a question on John. If you have any future session with the couple that would like to have a session on divorce support, I think this is a very good opportunity. Also, probably many of us also in the same situation. If you have that session, maybe we can have it one of of our programs later on in the future.
Okay, so just to let you know, retroval is for those who have close to divorce but still trying to save marriage, right? So in the Catholic Church, there are different programs. There's marriage preparation, there's marriage encounter. Retroval is for those who are kind of, thinking of divorce, but yeah, they're willing to give it one more chance. And then what we've just shared with you is the Catholic Divorce Support Group, which is for those who are already divorced or in the process, all right? And we use an American program, and that has been helpful to help healing of persons who have suffered this difficulty in their, who have gone through this painful experience in their life, right? If people are interested, yeah, we could let you know more about it, and possibly you might be the one to bring it to your country. It can be face-to-face, it can be also online via Zoom, and if it's on Zoom, yeah, we could help you get things started in your home country. Okay.
Thank you. So, yeah, anyone else wants to ask questions? You can unmute yourself. We still have about 10 minutes.
10 minutes.
Okay, while waiting, John, probably I would like to ask, as well as I listened to you, and then towards the end, I think Joann pointed a very important point here that, at the end of the day, you just have to accept, to understand and to accept your spouse, whatever he is. There's a song even, just accept the way he is, or the way she is, the way you are. But then I think many of us also very often listen hearing about this. If you want to change others, you need to change yourself. If you want to change your spouse, then you have to change yourself. Now, being accepting, it is part of changing ourselves. In your relationship between John and Joann, when you accept, do you see any change in your spouse, in John? When John accepts Joann, do you see that something changed in Joann? Because you cannot change yourself, but the other's party never think about to change them herself or himself, right? So
yeah. Okay, I think okay, so it works like this.
Okay.
Right? Joann and I have a major point of disagreement. We argue. She holds her position, I hold my position. And it's one of those where, well, it's not a moral issue where there is some moral principle at stake and so on. It's just difference of views of how to use our resources, our time, our relationship, and things like that, right? So where we cannot agree, you can say that we agree to disagree, right? And we give each other space to do what the other person feels that he or she wants to do. So we give space to the other person. So in my case, I give space to Joann, right? And I tell myself that, it's not as though I want to be a controlling husband or anything. It's we have freedom here. So she decides what is best to do with her time and resources. If I don't believe in it, of course, then I may not join in. On the other hand, if there are times when I say, look, I look at myself and examine myself. Why am I holding this particular view or position? Okay. And quite often, when I look at it and say, why am I thinking like this? And sometimes I find that my answer is just that I prefer it this way. It's a personal preference, right? So there's no reason for me to insist that it must be done my way. And when I accept that, I'm at peace. But interestingly, I notice that when I am at peace, Joann is less tense about it, and she becomes more open to me because I am less tense.
Uptight.
Less uptight, So when I am less uptight, then it makes her less uptight as well.
Okay, my turn to talk.
Yes, please.
You know, when I learned that if I accept John, I'm actually I have more peace. Now that when I do that, I should not expect him to change. And you know, as we get older, I can tell you, it gets harder and harder to live with your spouse,
Yes.
especially when we are in the retirement stage where we see each other from morning to night, and we notice, you know, all the tiny little bad habits of each other, and it really we get irritated
Will
over
he answer
small
your prayer
things,
next time?
and the small things can become big things.
See, that
And
is
this is
very
what
bad. It's a
happened to a
sin.
lot of our friends who are in our situation, retirement, semi-retirement stage. So when I accept him, I should not expect him to change. So when I change, I found that John started noticing that I am less impatient with him. I complain less about his slippers making so much noise at 6 a.m. in the morning, about switching on the lights when I'm still sleeping, and he wants to do his prayers. So that is my answer, Stefan.
Interesting. No wonder, because you seem to be at your 40 years of marriage. You seem to be at ease of joking each other. So you take each other lightly, and I think you take your marriage life not very seriously. Of course, you have a serious life, but not seriously, because you accept and you stuck with it. You just live with it, right? So yeah, I think that's a very good.
It's not just living with it, but turning it into a gift. Remember, we said that if you turn it into a gift, you are more peaceful.
Yes.
You're at peace with it, and it also the family is more harmonious, and your children are affected very adversely when they see the parents fighting. So whenever we want to have a big fight, we go somewhere else, out of the earshot of the children. And especially for couples with young children, I think it's very important not to have a fight, not to fight in front of the children, because we ourselves have seen the effect on our children when they were much younger. So we learned very quickly that we should not fight in front of the children. They get hurt.
Interesting.
And
Okay, there was a question on giving advice related to use of income when we also have to support our own families back home, right? So just a quick one. I mean, income is, well, if both of you are working, you've got income A, income B, and income A plus income B is, in a sense, your max, okay? Unless you want to borrow and go into debt, right? So the practical thing I would just suggest is whether or not you do a budget, right? So in my case, I do an annual budget. I estimate my income, I estimate Joanne's income, and then I say, well, we got A plus B, you know, and ordinarily, we just have to spend within A plus B. Now, how we spend within A and B, sometimes I have a discussion with Joanne. She is, shall I say, more free-flowing, less attentive to budget constraints, but I kind of build that in allocating certain sums. So my generic answer to Giselle, who asked this question, is you have to do a budget, and I mean, the max of your budget is your max, right? So you then spend within that. of course, you can, within that budget, have certain discretionary sums, all right, and that gives you some flexibility. But when you add these two together, a combined household budget, then it's something you agree to and you both live with it. Okay, so that's the initial planning stage. I would say that in my view, that's necessary.
Any other question going directly to you, John?
No, I don't think so.
Okay. John, I just want to ask you as a husband, no, for husbands who are here. Joann mentioned about you of being always thinking one step at a time. And then now we know that, women, even my own spouse, women are always thinking many steps. They lump up together, all the steps. And now you have Joann as a lawyer. I could imagine lawyer always speak a lot, no, and speak many steps. How can you cope with this? No, as a man, very organized, one step at a time, and your wife is many steps in advance, and everything's cluttered into one. So how do you, as a man here, as a husband?
Okay, before John answers, I like to think that I'm a creative thinker.
Okay.
He is a process thinker.
Process thinker.
Well, if you focus on what decisions do you need to make at a certain time, more than those decisions, I mean, put it this way, tomorrow we have to plan how we want to live tomorrow, what we want to do tomorrow, right? So today is a good time to plan for what we want to do tomorrow, okay? And it's quite concrete, okay? We could discuss what we want to do 1 year from now, but that is just kind of like, okay, ideas are flowing and we are interacting and so on, but we don't need to make a decision yet, right? So for me, yes, we can explore ideas and we can, discuss quite a few things, but the key thing is, after all the talking, what decisions do we need to make today for, of course, what we have to make today it's not just tomorrow, it may impact 1 year from now, etc. and so on, but focus on what decisions need to be made and the rest are possibilities that can be explored. When I have that mindset, it's a lot easier to deal with the many creative things that Joann throws at me.
And you, Joann, you agree to his approach on that? Sorry to
Well,
put
they've had some fights about this kind of approach.
Okay.
And John has got this belief that he should always set a low budget. Because then it gives room for variations. I'm very good at varying the budget.
I can see that. I think you're really a very ideal couples with, of course, with a lot of fights experience. One is an accountant, another one is a legal expert. So interesting. Okay, so
Somebody in the chat said that the imperfections of your spouse help to make you a better person.
Very nice.
Well, I mean, neither spouse is perfect, and whatever imperfections of a spouse, yes, it does make you a better person, provided that you are able to see the other person and love the other person for what he or she is.
Yeah, and also I would like to add, there's no perfect marriage, right? So, I mean, in fact, I remember when I and my wife got married, and the priest told me that, you don't fall in love when you are going steady or you are dating. You don't fall in love. You fall in love when you are in marriage already, and you fall in love. I really realized when you fight and you reconcile again, you love much more. And I think that's why fighting, as long as you can handle it, is a very a good way of, in fact, uniting a husband and wife. And yeah, so there's no perfect marriage.
Okay, there was a question. My partner says I just jump into issues and he's usually not ready when I bring up an issue. So should I just keep bringing things up until he learns how to respond to me, or should I just learn when to put up my fights?
Choose your battle.
Yeah, I think the general idea there is choose your battles, right? When like when our kids were young, there were many things we wanted to, we wanted to be good parents, and there are many things you want to tell your children, but you say too many things, and in a sense, too many things, nothing sticks, right? Similarly with spouse, if there are too many things you bring up, which you probably have brought up in the past before anyway, then it comes across you're nagging. Okay, so and well, I think most of us, me included, when I get nagged at, I switch off, right? So I would say, yeah, pick your battles, meaning identify your key issues and just work on those and be happy if those things are there. For the rest, make it a gift. Just learn to keep quiet.
In all these years of our marriage, I have learned how John functions, how his brain works. His brain has got many compartments, and he can only handle matters pertaining to one compartment at a time.
Yes.
So I have to bring out certain issues and bring it to his attention, and group them together, the issues, or decide to separate the issues and choose the occasion to have a discussion. Because I know that he's a process thinker, he can only do things and think about them one at a time. Whereas I'm a creative thinker, I can bring many issues up all at one go
And confuse me in the process.
and hoping that he'll be able to deal with them all in one go.
That's right. Isn't that very true, Joann? Because marriage is supposed to be complementing each other, but the complementary takes process, right? Does not happen on day one when you get married. No? So complementing each other, I mean, also accepting, understanding, so that you know what is the weakness of other, and you can fill in the gap, right? So what you are saying is really, really very true, because you complement each other very well.
Yeah.
Beautiful.
And we have to realize that complementarity in marriage is actually a good thing. I always tell John, you did not marry someone exactly like you.
Or like the mother, or like his mother. That's right. Wow, this is wonderful. Well, it's almost more than 1.5 hours. I think we can talk on and on and on, because there's a lot of issue that we want to discuss with you. We want to learn from you. What I suggest probably, John, if after this event, you can post those 2 events that you have, a dinner and also the other one, in the WhatsApp group. And I think for all of us here who are interested probably to know more about the programs that John and Joann is running in Singapore, by all means, please get in touch with John and Joann. I will make this recording available in the YouTube. I think this is very important, initiative or programs, so it can help many couples to improve their marriage relationship. I myself also and my wife running a program called the Marriage Course. It's a 7 session of marriage courses online. So it will be wonderful. We have a lot of programs like this. So you can also invite, if you have a lot of groups in Africa, for instance. I hope John and Joann would love to do safari in Africa and do dinner with our friends there in Africa or Nigeria. I think that's wonderful. I think these are the fruits of activities from these kind of events that we would like to have. So to have more people to understand better on marriage, life, and love issues. So before we end these programs, I'd like to ask again if anyone wants still have to ask one burning question. I have one before we end this program. Anyone from the chat or directly? Okay, now, John, just one last question. I think this is very important. We know that I want to put it into a higher plane, looking at the marriage not on a very secular human relationship, but also the other dimension. So we hear that for us Christian, for instance, marriage is not just between two persons, but there are three to marry, right? And the other person is God. So how do you bring God into your marriage here? I mean, you have 40 years marriage. For sure, you're a spiritual person. You have all the activity in the Catholic community. So how do you bring this? Because it does not happen that way when you fight and you don't wish that your fight, and then you can reconcile again and you keep happy, cheerful marriage for 40 years. There should be someone. So how do you bring this God into your marriage life?
Okay, I think in my case, what I found useful, we talk about time for prayer, right? In that time for prayer, now for many people, prayer is asking God for things, and they use vocal prayer, Our Father, Hail Mary, and so on. And in a sense, there's nothing wrong with that. But you can imagine that if I talk to Joann every day and say the same thing, really it misses out a lot of other things, right, that I should explore about Joann. So in the same way, I would say that we all need to have our own spiritual life where we ask ourselves, is God happy with me? That kind of question, right? Is he asking me to do something, right? So instead of just seeing prayer as asking God for things, to turn around the question and say, look, God has put me on this earth to be Joann's husband and to be the father of our 6 kids, and working in the place I'm working. This question, what does God want me? What is God asking of me? I think that's a useful question to bring up in our time of prayer. And sometimes it can be, what is God asking of me today? Right? So if, for example, yesterday, Joann and I had a fight, and we are sulking. Commonly, the answer I get is, God is asking me to be humble and to reach out to her. Right? At other times, it might be that, well, we haven't been fighting, but we've been so busy, and it's yeah. So I find bringing up my relationship, my marriage, my relationship, and so on, into prayer helps me to see my life in perspective. All right. So I find the way, what is God asking of me today in my marriage? Or what is God asking of me today as a father? That's a useful question to reflect on in prayer time.
Interesting. What about you, Joann?
Okay, for me, I was baptized as a Catholic just before our wedding.
Oh, okay.
And when I was 15 years old, I wanted very much to have a Catholic boyfriend. Simply because my mother says that I cannot be a Catholic, be baptized as a Catholic, unless my husband is a Catholic. So I've always wanted to be a Catholic. And being a Catholic after we got married, I often ask myself, what does it mean to be a Catholic wife? And I've attended many retreats and have come to understand that being a Catholic wife, firstly, you have to be close to God your Heavenly Father. And if you are close to Heavenly Father and you talk to Him every day, you will know what to do with your husband.
Interesting, wonderful. Wow, that's a very interesting answer. I think one is John has a purpose in life as a husband of Joann. I think in the other line, Joann dialoguing with God that as a wife, there's a mission also of being the wife of John. And I think I like very much your gift to John. John, it's a very simple to thank her of being your wife. And I think it's a simple but wonderful
Thank
gift.
you for being my wife.
And John does not have to spend a lot for the gift.
Yep, it was an expensive gift, but it came from the heart.
Exactly. Wonderful. So John and Joann, I would like, in behalf of the participant here, the Marriage Our Path to Holiness community, and myself also, thank you so much for being with us. I know it's been very late there in Singapore, and we pray for your next until golden anniversary. We pray for your 6 children grown up. We hope and pray that you keep on inspiring other couples, not only Singapore, but everywhere in the world. You continue to have energy on that. Also, for the participant here, again, I encourage you to get in touch with us. If you need help and you need any sessions, there are a lot of useful sessions that are or training programs that we have to strengthen our marriage life. Because as we know, marriage is for life, and marriage has a purpose. So we pray also for all of you here, participants who are in your marriage, probably any issue and problems. You keep on. I think that's the important thing. Keep on and fight. Because as John and Joann mentioned, don't waste a good fight. Any fight in marriage always has a purpose. It's a good fight. And I think we often hear there's a 5 language of love. And I would also to add another language of love, which is fighting. Because fighting is supposed to make you loving each other, right? So it's like giving you a salt, a taste on the food of the marriage. So with that, John and Joann, have a wonderful evening. Everyone, depending wherever you join in, have a wonderful morning, afternoon, and Sunday evenings. We hope to see you again next month, and we hope to see in many more interesting talks. Thank you, everyone, and have a wonderful.
Thank you.
Okay,
Thank you
thank you.
for joining us.
Thank
Wherever
you.
you are. Yes.
Bye-bye.
Please don't fight about what we spoke about.
Okay, I stop recording now.